me tell you about a friend. It's Craig LeBlanc where the good times never end. Talking Parks and Rec, it's a show you gotta know. Welcome one and all to the Daily Parks and Rec Show. It's the Daily Parks and Rec Show.
Those 18,000 trees in our inventory are trees that are growing either within city-owned parcels or growing within the public right-of-way. Trees growing somewhere on our wastewater treatment facility, and then all the trees that we have alongside the roadway. With that, we're capturing genus, species, size, classification. We also track growing space.
It was about 80 degrees here,
Yeah.
which is hot for San Franciscans, you know.
All right. So we are live again with the Daily Parks and Rec Show. We've got two special guests that have previously been on the show and have a very unique skill set that I wanted to go even deeper on with the topic of urban forestry, how important that is to our communities, and then what are the how-tos. You know, we can always talk about how important something is, but then knowing something and doing something are two totally different two different animals to talk about. So maybe each of you can kind of introduce yourself, and then maybe a small intro into urban forestry in general as we were kind of introducing this topic to the Daily Parks and Rec Show. Bryan, would you like to go first?
Sure. Bryan Myers. I manage the park system here in Post Falls, Idaho. We're a community of just under 50,000 people. And among that, we've got a little over 18,000 trees in our tree inventory and another almost 650 acres of naturalized area, natural forest land that our park system extends to. Total park area that we manage of 36 sites is sitting around 900 acres total. So we got some developed parkland and undeveloped parkland for trails and open space, rock climbing, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
We also have close to 4 miles of riverfront, and that also sits in my urban forestries division as far as shoreline management and shoreline restoration. In the non-developed park areas, they take the lead on that role. And then we integrate with the community planning side with urban forestry. It's the kind of the linchpin to making a successful program in planning a growing community, growing at 4 to 5% annually, average about 4% over the last 20 years. So we've been growing dramatically year in and year out, and trying to set the community up for success long term is the major focus of our urban forestry division. So.
Yeah, and I love how we're starting to use terminology like tree inventory. I know to the regular layperson, there's probably maybe a couple of pages of glossary terms that are common to this industry that I want to make sure that we're defining. Are there any other things like tree inventory, or I'm trying to think of some of the other ones that I've had that are maybe we can start to define. If y'all say anything like that, try to define it best you can, because I know me coming into this, I'm like, oh shoot, my vocabulary is lacking when it comes to this.
Yeah.
Let's see, Seve, would you like to kind of go ahead and introduce yourself?
Oh, sure. No, thank you, Craig. Morning, everyone. I'm Seve Ghose. I'm currently the executive director of the Yerba Buena Gardens Conservancy, which takes care of about 87 acres in downtown San Francisco. So trees and the urban heat island and some of those other phrases that Craig was talking about are a big deal here. You know, we try to manage that as best we can, and considering that we're in the middle of a concrete jungle, so to speak. And I've had the pleasure of working in 5 other states, and many of the cities that I've worked in, including Portland, Oregon, Springfield, Oregon, Louisville, Kentucky, where trees are very highly valued, and having the separate forestry departments or urban forestry departments or divisions in the Parks and Recreation Department was a big help. And then also having worked in other places where trees, we'll talk about this topic later, are not as valued, and sometimes it's an afterthought till a disaster happens, and then people mobilize to move to the next phase of how valuable trees are to the environment, to the community, to the city, to the health and well-being of the community, and so on. So I'm sure we'll be talking about a lot of this, but happy to be here and look forward to the conversation. Thank you.
All right, so we'll start off with two definitions. Bryan, why don't you take this one? We'll say tree inventory. What do you mean by that? What are the different categories inside of tree inventory, like an old tree versus a new tree? And then, how do you categorize maybe even spots when people say, hey, we want to plant 3,000 trees? How do we define that category? And then, Seve, if I could have you define, and this is something I don't think a lot of people think about, when you say, would you say urban heat island?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd like you to define that one as well. Bryan, why don't you take tree inventory a little bit?
I might go just one step above tree inventory and talk about urban and community forestry first. So urban community forestry would be kind of the things that we wrap around the urban environment and tree canopy as it relates to that. So when we're talking urban forestry, we're talking about managing a stand of plant material that's inside of an urban setting. And in that realm, community forestry is managing the community elements of that urban forest. So some of those elements are privately owned, privately held. And in our community, we largely don't address those private trees within our urban forestry ordinance. So Idaho's a very strong private property rights state, and as such, we don't have much for regulation as it relates to trees that stand on somebody else's private property, with the exception of infestation and disease. Where we get involved is on the public trees. So for our inventory, our community inventory of public trees, as I would call it, those 18,000 trees in our inventory are trees that are growing either within city-owned parcels or growing within the public right-of-way. So think city hall campuses, police department campuses, trees growing somewhere on our wastewater treatment facility, and then all the trees that we have alongside the roadway. Those are the elements that we have in our tree inventory. And with that, we're capturing genus, species, size, classification. We also track growing space. So generally what kind of planting area they have to thrive in, and any other conflicts that may exist, whether there's overhead power lines, utility corridor, underground utilities that we're aware of that may be encumbering the tree. All of those sorts of elements we're trying to capture when we go out and complete a tree inventory. And we attempt to do that on a 5-year cycle. Some communities will go out that another way, where they contract out an inventory all at once. But the goal is to have a snapshot, either sequential, like we do, or at one point in time of the age, classification, and just general overall number of assets that the city has to maintain and manage. And that can come into value, particularly during storm events, or when things that eventually do happen within a community. Being able to articulate what the value of that canopy was, and what the overall expenses are to be able to respond to an event like that.
And so I like how you say
reasons.
Yeah, I like how you say these are the public trees and trees that y'all are responsible for to maintain. Much different than like a patch of grass. These trees can block roadways and get struck by lightning or catch on fire or be visibly between you and like a playground that you kind of have to trim up a little bit. Are there any other things that you think, as far as maintaining these tree canopies and stuff?
Yeah, there's, when you get into the roadway right-of-way trees, the big one is having the right tree planted in the right spot, that you're not having, are going to cause conflicts with utility corridors. Ensuring that what is being planted in that space, or what is being maintained in those spaces. And we partner with our local utility districts sometimes to identify trees that we know are going to be annual perennial maintenance challenges because they're just the wrong tree to be planted under a high voltage power line. And we'll work with them to sometimes do removals and then coming back in and replanting with a smaller classification tree that can succeed in that environment and reduce the overall burden to the community to maintain that, whether that's being an expense of the utility purveyor or the expense of the city. The community is bearing the cost of that. So we're active in working with those utility providers to ensure that we're providing the best success for the overall transportation infrastructure and utility infrastructure, as well as providing shade for the community and desirable, beautiful community.
Yeah. Okay, and we're going to come back and touch on this subject as far as maintaining these, because that's almost a whole nother episode, and might be a good fit for our facilities maintenance show as well. But Seve, let's dig into what are some of the values that these trees bring to our community, and maybe we can start off with that definition of urban heat island, and then we can go on from there.
Okay. No, thank you. So the urban heat island, I'll use a very simplistic definition of it. So today, the weather might be, say, 80 degrees as the listed temperature, which is the air temperature. But if you're in a downtown setting where there's lots of concrete, asphalt, and so on, you might experience temperatures as high as close to 90 degrees, depending on the city or the community you're in or the latitude you're in the U.S. But then in the shade, you might actually even experience 2 or 3 degrees cooler than the temperature that they're listing of 80 degrees. So that's that urban heat island where people's lives are affected by anywhere from 7 to 10 degrees on a typical day, just by walking through a sidewalk or being in concrete or in a parking lot, going into a store where the real temperature might be quite a bit different. And what it does is for folks that have health issues related to asthma or, other challenges, breathing challenges, and so on, the higher temperature also releases more ozone. So you might have heard also the related term to urban heat island is the ozone action days. So typically many cities might restrict the firing up of mowers, lawn mowers, and so on during the height of the day, height of the heat of the day, which is between 10 a.m. and 4 p.m. So they expect you to do all the mowing before 10 a.m. or after 4 p.m. so that we do not heighten the challenges that people might have with their health related to the ozone in the atmosphere. So that's the basic definition. I know it's a lot of terminologies and phrases I use there, but the easiest way to tackle that is basically more trees and a growth in tree canopy, as Bryan was alluding to, is like, how do you grow trees? And the one thing I want to address here is also, I know many developers like to, build communities and all that, but they're planting these very small trees that might take 10, 12 years to mature, if that. And as we also know, the success rate of most of the trees planted in new developments or urban settings is about 7 years, typically, meaning if they don't go past 7 years, they're not usually making it, in the urban environment because of all the other issues, depending on, again, parts of the country, snow, salt, heat, humidity, you name it, the whole list of things. So there are many aspects to the whole urban heat island. How do you fight it? How do you deal with it? And the best way that we have found that we've had success is to pick certain neighborhoods where the urban heat island does have a higher level of impact. And it's usually in poorer neighborhoods or marginalized neighborhoods. So, because those are usually the neglected areas where trees have been cut down, or once there was an accident or some bad weather event happened, those are usually the last areas to see the tree being replanted or put back in there. And so things get worse usually as far as the heat island. So the one, if I could touch on one great project that took place in Louisville, and it's still going on, it's called the Green Heart Project in Louisville, Kentucky. It's a partnership between the University of Louisville Medical School, the Nature Conservancy, and the city itself. So the idea was to plant actually not just the smaller trees in front of people's yards, which used to have trees. And this neighborhood goes back many, many years, from the Sears homes from after the war and so on, to like where the trees just disappeared over time, and they were experiencing higher health issues with life expectancy as low as 39 years for adult males. And this is in downtown Louisville, or close to downtown Louisville. And so we worked with the partners and the entities in planting 25 to 30 foot tall trees with pretty nice canopy. And trees do tend to do well in Louisville because of the weather. They grow fast. And we tabulated health vitals pre-trees, during trees, and post-trees. And we saw the marked improvement. I mean, even in short 3 years, people's life expectancy went up by close to 5 years just by having that tree out in the front yard. It's where they could sit and enjoy it, also be in the shade and so on. So there are examples to show that the urban heat island effect, the negative effects of urban heat island effect, can be marginalized or dealt with by planting larger trees. So my recommendation would be, when developers develop new neighborhoods, to plant a little bigger tree, because you might have an immediate effect. Whereas you can neutralize some of the the concrete and asphalt that's going in for the driveways and the roads that are being put in the neighborhoods. So that's just an early start, but I'm sure we'll get into it more. So.
Yeah. And I love to start conversations off. I don't know if y'all what's the name of that guy? I always just start with why. Why are we doing what we're doing? And so maybe we can each speak a little bit on that topic as a good starting spot for urban forestry. And I'm looking at the time at 15 minutes. I'm like, there is no way we're covering all this in one episode, but we'll do the best we can to get it going. But so why are we planting trees? I think you gave a great story by life extension, but maybe if we can dig a little deeper on that. And then Bryan, anything that you'd like to add to why you think trees are important, either personally that you've experienced, or maybe what you've seen in your community around trees and planting and stuff like that. Really just trying to dig into the why this is so important. Let's see, Bryan. Go ahead, Bryan, you go first, and then Seve, you can follow in on that one.
Good. Yeah. Well, our community, we're pretty fortunate that our urban forestry program really was able to kick off about 25 years ago. We had an individual that had worked at the federal government level in the U.S. Forestry Department, and his focus was urban and community forestry. And he happened to retire to our community and helped launch our urban forestry tree board and established our arboretum here in town early on. And so and beyond that, our community had a timber heritage. So we were largely a mill town back in the turn of 1900s. And as a result, timber production, largely our urban forestry has been kind of the mindset of, can you climb a tree with spurs on and do a top-down removal? And it has really been a shift of managing tall trees that historically would have been growing on the fringes of our prairie to a more urbanized setting, and working towards managing stormwater runoff in stormwater treatment swales and such, and reducing just the harshness of urban development on a community that was previously small. For me, one of the big priorities is just managing a forest and managing these new plantings so that we aren't creating future liabilities for the community. And that all begins with planting. As I said, we're a growing community, so we have a lot of new developments coming in, and we're involved in the review of that. So ensuring that we're getting species diversification at the time of planting, so that we're reducing the potential impacts for new pests that may be emerging and entering into our environment. And so we don't end up with entire communities where all of the trees are going to get wiped out by a future pest. We're seeing that throughout the United States with emerald ash borer, where entire communities are losing 30 to 50% of their canopy due to this one pest. Asian longhorn beetle was another one that we're waiting for what the impacts of that will be. And those sorts of dynamics when it comes to managing an urban forest, I think are key. Right along with choosing the correct tree to be planted is ensuring it gets planted correct. As you mentioned, the overall survivability is that average of about 7 years. That's what the data is showing us. And largely that is due to the way these trees are being installed. The production nurseries, often these trees are coming down the line and they move from one size pot to the next size pot to the next size pot. And by the time they make it to the field, or make it to the installation location, oftentimes you'll see 2 to 3 to 4 inches of soil that's piled up on top of that original root ball. And being active in the inspection process at the time of installation has been key for us, working with not just the developers, but also the installers, and ensuring that they're becoming familiar with how to successfully plant a tree for the long-term sustainability. Because root tissue is different than trunk tissue. That trunk tissue cannot handle that moisture against the base of the trunk. So we're active in ensuring that the root flare is visible at the soil surface at the time of planting. And that just reduces the potential for problems down the road. And then for our community, we're a semi-arid environment. Particularly in the summertime, we get very, very little rainfall. So we require all public trees to be irrigated. So those things are setting us up for success at installation. And as we discussed in the last call, we're active in coming back through on a 5-year basis, trying to do some young tree, juvenile tree pruning. Second year out, removing tree stakes so we don't have packaging material still on a tree that causes girdling and eventually failure of a tree, and then making sure we're being active in doing pruning that's necessary to establish a good, strong central leader, which is the central bud that's working its way north vertically within the canopy, something that has the ability to be strong, not have what we call included bark or branch unions where bark is being included that will cause future decay. We want to reduce the size of that potential early on within that tree's life, so that we're reducing the potential for major failures down the road. And in that, we're being active in managing the canopy from a very young point, so that we don't see those failures down the road.
Yeah, and I really like how you're highlighting not just another page of terms that we need to understand a little bit better, but just start talking about them. And like anything else that you're learning, you'll catch on as we go through this. But I really like how what you're saying highlights the importance of planning here, because a lot of these, and I don't want to understate how costly it is to plant the wrong species in the wrong place, and it can take a decade for you to figure this problem out. And trees are not expensive by most estimations. I think you're a minimum around $1,000 by the time you buy the tree, the location. Then you've got a whole slew of watering and fertilizing and pruning over the first 20 years of this tree's life. But while we're still on the why topic as well, Seve, what are the other health benefits around having trees that we can kind of point to as how important this is to your community?
No, absolutely. The other side of the why is, with climate change and all the ill effects of weather, variances and so on, trees offer that buffer, for the community. So even in flood-prone zones, if there were lots of trees, it does flood, but you might see the water recede a lot quicker, potentially, things like that. Again, also dependent on what species were planted, or if they were planted, or if it's natural, that's even better, because they are quite easy to then suck up all the water during flood events and so on. The other piece is just the overall air quality. As you know, trees give off oxygen. The more trees you have, the more oxygen in the air, and also the absorption of carbon dioxide. So with us having our love for the automobile and all that, we like to be everywhere with the car. How do you cut back on the carbon dioxide use? Well, you can maybe or you could have a difficult time changing human behavior, but you can always plant a tree. So, or you could plant 20 trees to take care of the one car that's always driving on that particular road, and so on. And just to share some numbers, the equivalent of one mower running for an hour is approximately the same as 10 cars running for an hour also. So when we think about mowing and having parks that are mowed on a weekly or bi-weekly basis and so on, those are big challenges for many parks and recreation departments or cities and communities to think about. Do we want more manicured parks, or do you want more naturalized parks? I know Bryan used the term naturalized. So those are some of the debates as to the why. Do you want a better community for the next, or in the next 50 years, or do you want a better community or you don't care about a better community in the future because you'll be gone and so on. So how do you balance all these things out? So people's lives are at stake, basically, is what it is at the end of the day. Health and wellness, well-being, and especially the young. They might see a tree now, but maybe 10 years from now, if we do not take care of some of these things, might not see any trees in their community. And so that's the other balancing act that we have to do. I think the other big thing to share about is that species variety. Actually, there are many stories similar to what Bryan was alluding to, is that the best example I can think of from the 80s was the Dutch elm disease that took down pretty much 70 to 75% of the mature trees. I'm talking about 8 to 9 foot diameter trees, elm trees in Evanston, Illinois. If you had seen photos of pre-Dutch elm disease and post Dutch elm disease in Evanston, Illinois, it's just heart-wrenching and heartbreaking. And the last piece to share about the why is that we have very much a love relationship with trees. I mean, we love to see trees wherever we go. Even in the desert, you might see that one tree in the corner. That's where we end up going or talking about. So trees have always had this, I guess, a loving relationship with humanity over time. You might recall also about 4 months ago, they cut down that one tree that's been talked about in English history for many years in Great Britain, where you came off in the one meadow, and there was that one tree there that was recently cut down by a vandal. In fact, the person just got sentenced to jail for 3 years, I believe, which is not enough, I believe, but that's a separate issue. But the idea was that this tree had become iconic. It drew people, people wrote poems about it, stories about it. So it's about, uplifting life and so on. That's what trees do. And that's the one challenge I think that many communities are missing out on. So I think first doing the inventory and then having policies in place and then moving forward. And we'll talk about some of these other policies, maybe a little bit later, but I'll stop there for now.
Yeah. And just to tell a little story, I'm sure each of you may have one, and I welcome you to kind of share it. But I remember one of the first dates I ever went on with my wife, I just had a love for these live oak trees in the South. And so we got in the car and I say, here, we're just going to go measure trees. And we brought a rope and we just tried to find the biggest trees and anything we could find over 8 feet in diameter. And I think we went through like 12 trees that were around our area. They were just massive. And we named them all. And all of my children still remember, and me and Sherry still remember going back to those trees, and we named them. And one was called Mr. Bridge because it was by the bridge. One was called Mr. Bank because it was by the bank. And we still drive past these to this day. So it really is a part of they kind of become like citizens of your community as they become these monuments. But I'd like to ask you to maybe define, when you say manicured versus naturalized, is that landscape? Am I saying those two words right? Manicured versus naturalized? Can you maybe double click on that one?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So over the last 20 years, especially, because with all the challenges of budget cuts and so on faced by parks and recreation departments, where do you cut? So the one place to cut is potentially the mowing piece, because that does take a lot of time and effort. And some cities might not have the capacity. You might have one park maintenance office, but you might have to drive 7 miles to the east or north or wherever to get that. So it takes time, takes resources and all of that. So when you look at budget cuts, what we have done over the course of the last 20 years especially is naturalize many areas. So what that means is that you might have had a sloping park where mowers would get stuck, or you didn't need to mow it because the bottom was usually wet, because the rainwater percolates down to the bottom. You naturalize it, meaning you introduce native species, plants, and even potentially trees also into that area so that it holds up better in the future. Plus you don't have to mow, and then it looks beautiful too, and it actually helps animals, and so both flora and fauna thrive because it becomes a throughway for wildlife. Many of us might not talk about wildlife in the urban setting, but offering them those pathways to the next area of green space or the creek bed or the stream bed, very important to all of that. So it has a huge impact on how we do these things, trees, naturalization. And naturalization, by the way, does not cost as much. It is a philosophical and a mindset change in most communities, because when we tried that in some of the urban areas, the first question was, I don't want to see more critters and things in my backyard. So that's how people fight usually. I know we're laughing, but it's funny how much opposition, you'll get. And the longer you delay that implementation of a naturalized area, you're impacting your personal health, basically, is what's happening. Because that mower in the backyard, so to speak, running for an hour, it's spewing a lot of carbon dioxide. You might not even have a tree in the backyard, and so not being able to sequester that carbon is also a challenge. So overall, this topic is very important because communities have to fight this head on. And so that's the second phase to this, is that having policies in place, so like no idling policy. Many cities have that for city vehicles, but how do you get a resident to do that? Like when they're picking up their child or dropping their child off at school, you've seen the lines that go about a mile long. Those cars are not shut down. Although a lot of the newer cars, they shut down on their own. But still, the fact that you're basically idling your car for about a mile before you drop your kids off to school or when you pick them up, that's a huge challenge. That's in front of kids. You're doing that, meaning that they're breathing all this carbon dioxide or the other pollutants that are out there in the air at that time. So how do you mitigate some of this? And again, the future is with the kids, education and sharing. That's a great story. Like you were talking about the story. Imagine young brother and sister going out into the forest and measuring trees and making sure that the tree is protected for the next 10, 15, 20 years. And once it gets past that 15, 20 years, they're pretty much on their own and they'll thrive usually. But it's those first 15, 20 years is where we need the nurturing and the caring, to make sure the trees make it through. So yeah, I know I'm talking about a lot of things here, but the basic essence is, as you can tell, I love trees and trees do play a role. One last quick story to share. According to I know Guinness Book has this weird records, but the record for the largest tree is in Calcutta. Now it's called Kolkata, India. It's a banyan tree, And as you know, the banyan tree puts in the roots into the ground so it can spread its canopy. It's supposedly like 200 meters wide.
Wow.
That's how big of a tree it is. But what it does is it tells the story, so that story will continue, hopefully, because banyan trees live for many, many years, including thousands of years. And so it has a storytelling. So whether it's mythical or real, it kind of gets that community growth or community building done. So.
Yeah. And hopefully I'm not upsetting too many people, but another good reason that I like my Tesla is it moves the carbon dioxide to where the electricity is being produced, and maybe we can figure out a way to use nuclear or some other kind of source that doesn't pollute quite as much. But Bryan, do you have anything to add as far as manicured versus naturalized, and especially maybe even touch on the maintenance difference between those two and how trees play a role in that?
Yeah. On the maintenance side, but other than that, I would also say just the community acceptance to that is one of the big keys in being successful in that. And it's not only the community that may be utilizing a space, but also the community that maintains those spaces. I know we've struggled from time to time with trying to establish tall grass prairie, kind of links golf course style landscape around the fringes of parks. One, because the community will raise issue with grass that's maintained over 6 inches in height. That's one of those legacy ordinances that exists in our community where we can call it out as a shrub bed, but they still see it as a potential fire danger. And those sorts of mindset shifts are a challenge to try to address. And to be able to successfully do that, we have to train our staff in managing those areas differently than we do with a mowing type management operation. We have to be more active in managing noxious weeds and other broadleaf weeds that may be establishing in there that are non-desirables. And just being able to articulate that this patch or little area of native or naturalized plants in this area are in allowing, say, this covey of quail to exist in this neighborhood that otherwise wouldn't be able to be in this space. And this small little pocket park or this small little portion of a otherwise developed park is allowing that to happen. We've had the group of quail was an example of a park that we developed back in 2018. It was a area that was always set to be a park, but it was an otherwise undeveloped site within this neighborhood. And when we went in to do our site survey at the time of development, we walked through and there was a group of dogwood shrubs and some tall grass that had existed there, and there were quail all over in this park. or what was going to be a park. And we were able to retain that little pocket throughout the site of development as the surrounding neighborhoods stood up. And then we were able to establish another little pocket of landscape plants that somewhat reminisced what was originally there. And we were able to maintain that canopy and that cover for those critters to be able to exist within this neighborhood. And I think those sorts of things, being able to see that at the time of development or changes, being able to value those environments and the kids that will be coming through that park and getting to see those other critters in an otherwise urban setting is very important. Being able to articulate the value of that is a challenge, but it's the work that's set out before us. So,
is there any other when we talk? I've heard both of you say mind shifts or reframing of mindset. Can we kind of highlight some of the older versus the new, or kind of where you are? Let's say if you're just in an urban environment, you really don't understand the importance of trees, and so what's the current mindset if that's where you are, and then where would y'all like to see the mindset shift to?
I think for our community, some of the mind shift happens as they're moving to this place. With that growth curve we're on, many of the individuals that are moving here are accustomed to being in communities that are a little more manicured and don't necessarily have the forest type background, where some of our long-term residents, they were used to seeing shrubland with tall growth pine as a native landscape and a dominant landscape throughout the community. And when you move into a community and start to shift those changes, and you're planting more ornamental type plants, less of the ponderosa pine because you don't want to deal with the long needles in your yard. It just is changing the overall demographic in the canopy cover type. So I guess some of that mindset shift is just trying to root individuals in the place that they are now, and blending of the two types of environments, so that long term we have success and we can still have some of the native plants existing in these communities.
Yeah. Seve, you have anything to add to that as far as the reframing that you'd like to see?
Yeah, the reframing is more about just the reality and not necessarily just trees, but overall greenscape. So I'll use the example of, say, from the Midwest. Say, I grew up in Iowa, so moving from, say, Iowa to Colorado, a typical move in my mind would be like, oh, I had the nice manicured well front yard, nice grass, bluegrass. I want to see bluegrass. Well, bluegrass has a hard time growing. It's the thirstiest grass around. So how do you make that grow in Colorado, say, for example, where it's a high arid desert? How do you make that happen? Because it takes more resources, number one, plus you're mowing, plus you're watering it every day in the summer months where it's hot, and low humidity also, which is kind of interesting too, that people would want bluegrass in Colorado, for example. But the expectation is there. And how do you change that mindset? And it takes a lot of work and effort. Many communities have done that through ordinances. That's about the only way. But, if you pass an ordinance, it becomes the law. But as far as overall changing mindsets, it's a tough battle in many areas across the country, especially with movement of peoples and so on and ideas. It's what they're used to and what they're comfortable with. How do you change it to something that has repercussions, not today maybe, but 10 years, 15 years, 20, 30 years down the line. So.
And maybe we can talk about the help kind of color in the financial obligations. When we talk about, I want to plant 10,000 trees. So let's just say we'll go with that nice round number, maybe even 1,000 trees. When you say 1,000 trees in an urban environment, what's the price tag and what's the financial commitment? And then what's the labor commitment to something like that? And I know it's different so just round numbers here.
Brian, I'll let Brian speak to that. Maybe he's got more direct information.
Sure.
Yeah, I don't know that I can put a dollar to each of those trees at this point.
Mhm.
And it largely depends on what the condition of those trees happen to be. If
Mhm.
you're able to get them established in a way that they are being set up for success and they have adequate space to grow, that you're not causing additional conflicts with curb lines and sidewalks, your dollar is going to go a lot further in terms of maintenance.
Mhm.
And again, it comes down to that pre-planning phase. If you're planting that same 1,000 trees all within 4 foot by 4 foot tree wells inside of a sidewalk,
Mhm.
you're going to use a far greater share of your maintenance dollars in that environment than if you're able to leverage stormwater treatment in a biovegetated swale. So a, a, a wide 15-foot wide depression along the side of the roadway that gives ample room for root growth and expansion, uh, and the other resource needs of water and uncompacted soil. If you're able to provide that type of an environment for those trees, your maintenance dollar is going to be able to be leveraged and stretched. So,
Mhm.
uh,
Well,
and
maybe let's just pick one. Let's pick a certain variety of tree. So what tree would you plant in your area on side of a road, that's got to deal, it's got to live inside of some right of way? Is it a 5-year-old tree? What type of species is it? And then what's the cost to get that, cost to plant it? And then what's your 20-year roadmap for that one tree times 1,000? And we can kind of I know they're all different, but just trying to put some numbers to it.
now our standard would be to plant a 2-inch diameter tree.
Mhm.
So
And how old is that tree?
it's probably in that 5 to 7 year range, depending on
Okay.
species. And we have a list of about, I would say, 45 to 50 trees that you could choose from. And we've divided those up into classifications. Class one being your lower height at maturity. So those would be suitable for growth under overhead power conductors or utilities. Our
Mhm.
class two are kind of the mid range height, up to say 30, 35 feet. And those can be kind of adjacent to those overhead conductors. And then our class three are our large trees, oaks, many of the maples, Kentucky coffee tree, some of those that are going to be a larger diameter tree, larger height of tree. Many of our native pines and conifers would be in that class three characteristic. So that's what we're looking to plant at the time of establishment. From the nursery, we were looking about $350 per tree.
And that's
Uh,
for the big ones, the older large growth trees. Let's stick with, say, the 5-year oak tree. So now we're talking somewhat of a legacy tree that's going to be there and it has nothing above it. So there's no consideration for
yeah, so
those are about.
we're looking at 350, 300 to $350. Back when I was in the commercial side of things, typically you just basically double the cost of your product, and that's your installation cost. So we're
Mhm.
talking $700 for installation, and then you've got at year one coming back to remove tree stakes and packaging material off of the tree, any inspections that may occur uh, from both city staff or individual developers. And then we try to come back at year five, somewhere within the first 5 years, I guess would be a better
Mhm.
way to say it. And then we set our community up that we're going back and repruning on a 5 year cycle. So that looks like an update of our inventory and pruning maintenance task on a
Mm.
5 year cycle for the first 20 years. At
And
that point, we're
what
hoping that things are generally set up for success to where we can decrease that frequency of maintenance need. But primarily, we're looking to just set the thing up for success and reduce conflicts with sidewalks and roadways and signage and whatever else may be there.
And as far as a pruning crew, that's probably what a bucket truck, some type of trimmer or whatever, is that, one crew per 10,000 trees on as far as managing those canopies?
Yeah, we're sitting at the 18,000 trees in our inventory, and we have a 3-person crew. So a supervisor and 2 field technicians that are out on a day-to-day basis. We have a separate individual that's active in our naturalized setting, managing trails and waterway improvement, or waterway shoreline restoration and that sort of thing. And then we also leverage some contracts from time to time as well. We have a number of tall tree removal contractors that we can work with where needed. But for the most part, our team is out with a small bucket truck, as we discussed on our last show, using those staff to help source that material, or write the specifications for that unit was key in our ability to maintain productivity with that team. They also have at their disposal another separate dump truck that has a trailer with a small stand-on mini skid type unit for planting and just moving materials around and that sort of thing. We don't have a lot of planting that we do in-house. We do have a full nursery operation we run to try to supplement plantings in the community, because we can grow a tree for 5 years, taking cuttings and running our propagation table to establish trees and working their way through succession in our nursery environment. So we can produce about 300 trees a year using that platform, and just trying to leverage the dollars the best we can. Yes, there's some staff time that goes with that, but largely those are on the shoulders, and we're able to leverage the time where they're not necessarily as active, being able to repot plants and get things moved to the next stage of growth.
And so how much, and just to highlight that all bucket trucks are not created equal. Speaking as a former master electrician that swapped out lights, there's bucket trucks for electricians, there's bucket trucks for linemen, and then there's tree trimming bucket trucks, and they are completely different. So make sure that you get the expertise of masters in those areas before you go purchase a piece of equipment, and treat it like all bucket trucks, or in a bucket truck's a bucket truck. How much money do you have tied up in that 3-man equipment show that you got going on?
Annually, labor-wise, we're just under $250,000 in labor for the position staffing needs and positions. And then equipment-wise, we've got a 7-year replacement cycle on our equipment. So we're looking at a full inventory of equipment fleet of about $350,000 for the truck, the chipper, saws and such that might be on the truck, the mini skid, separate truck with utility trailer, dump trailer, and annualized over 7 years is what we're aiming for there.
Love it. Seve, did you have any comments on anything said so far?
No, that's great to hear that Bryan has the support in his community for at least that level of staffing and equipment. That's amazing. That's great. And just to add a little bit nuance also to, you mentioned earlier about how do you change the mindset or the culture of the agency, culture of the community. A couple of stories, So obviously planting more trees and being close to parks, green space and all that raises home values. But then depends on who you talk to. Some people, when you raise the home value, they're paying more in taxes. So they might argue, well, I don't want to pay more in taxes, but I want to enjoy the trees. So, it's a double-edged sword. And then the second piece is, as more and more people, at least in the urban areas, slip into poverty, how do you make use of the park space? So the other piece that I've always pushed for, at least in the last 10 years, is urban farming. So, but that also is a double-edged sword. So I've talked to many parks maintenance staff. They don't like to see the fruit falling on the ground, then creates more, maintenance nightmares and so on, according to them, But the fact is, using urban spaces for feeding the community, urban farming is another piece that has taken hold in many cities, and they're doing it very, very well. And these are usually fruits that might have even gone by the wayside. They're not typically found in the grocery stores. So these are fruit trees that, like a pawpaw tree in Indiana, where it came from, is a great source of nutrition and all that, but who buys a pawpaw in a store, that kind of thing, but it's a great nutritious fruit. If you were allowed to grow that in the urban setting in many of the Midwestern cities, that could take care of a lot of the, food challenges, or some of the food challenges that we have in communities that are of need, basically. And so, again, offering a different perspective to why trees and why the opportunity is there that we could take advantage of to, again, build community and get the greenscapes up, the trees up. It also helps with all the other things we talked about for the last 45 minutes or so. So
Yeah.
again, a well-rounded piece to it.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that. My grandfather was a huge planter of fruit trees, and so all of the grandkids, one of the things he would do is take us to go plant fruit trees on all of our parents' properties and stuff. And so ever since then, everywhere I live, I go plant citrus fruits because they grow really well in the South. But I never thought from a community standpoint, just planting trees and just say, this is your food. We're just going to let it grow. Is there any community doing that, or?
And we just did that actually at our Yerba Buena Gardens. We planted 20 fruit trees after consultation with the community, mainly Filipino and Chinese origin. So we planted fruit trees that are prevalent in their areas and cultures, which some of the fruits you might not get here, like a loquat, for example, or a persimmon or a pomegranate, so they're doing well. We're in our second year and we actually have fruit coming on them. And then obviously we did plant the citrus too, all the three, lime, lemon, and orange, and they're thriving too. So again, just to look on their face to say that, or show them that you can pick the fruit, eat it, or take it home and, eat it, is just priceless, just to see that the fact that it just, creates community again. So.
Yeah. And the fruit trees around here, if you plant one in the South, there's no way you can eat them all. And so to have a public tree that's just kind of food for the public, that would be, that's a great, I've never even thought of that. That's fantastic. Bryan, anything to add on that before I move on to I can't believe it's at 51 minutes. This flew.
I'd just say on the mindset shift piece, one of the things our community's done to be really successful in that front is we partnered with a developer who had a relationship with a local nursery or a regional nursery, and they would actually provide us with over 4,000 small half-inch diameter whips, is what we call them, coming out of the nursery.
A whip?
And a whip. It's a small diameter tree, bare root.
So that's like the size of your thumb, one or 2 years old? Okay.
Yep, exactly. Grafted onto rootstock is how it's produced in the nursery. So they would provide us with nearly 4,000, sometimes a little more trees, and we ran that program for almost 20 years. So 60,000 new trees that were planted in our community off of this program.
Wow.
And with that, it was a effort that city staff brought the trees in early in the week, established them in a small little holding yard nursery at one of our large regional parks, and the community all knew this was coming up. The phone calls would start to roll in about 6 weeks in advance. Everybody wanted to know what varieties of trees we were going to have, and they would show up starting at about 6 o'clock in the morning and lining up like they're waiting for Garth Brooks tickets in the 90s. And so we would hand out all of those trees by noon that day. And
wow.
The community would go out and plant these in their yard, sometimes in the right of way. And along the line, while these folks are waiting, we've got a captive audience, right? So we can start to help work with our local master gardeners programs, our local forestry extension office, to provide some education and training of right tree, right place, planting techniques, care and maintenance of their trees, that tree and other trees on their property. And it was an extremely successful program. We've since lost that relationship with that local nursery, and we've had to kind of pivot. Some of the reason for us to establish a growing nursery so we can start to rebuild our own production nursery for that type of a program. And this last year, the last 2 years, we've been able to extend that out to about 300 trees that we're handing out that are grown either with local nurseries or part of our stock here. And with that, we've expanded the education piece and basically created a passport stamp for staff, for the citizens that want to receive a tree, because now we got a little more of a scarce resource on this tree giveaway. And we have a rotation within a park and providing that education piece. And it turns into a quarter of a day community event where staff gets to share their expertise with the general public, and folks get to go home with a new tree to plant. This time a little larger in diameter and likely a little more successful at time of establishment. I would just say the ability for staff to lead with a carrot, not necessarily the stick of ordinance, is where I like to live. And if we can do that through these types of community events where we're providing that extra education, where we're engaging the youth. We have another program where we're taking fifth graders, every fifth grade student in our school districts, and including private school and homeschool, they get to go on a half-day field trip in one of our forestry type settings, and they learn about forest fire, fuels reduction treatments, and managing forest fires, and the need to actively manage forest environments. And we talk about wildlife in those settings and such. And being able to engage those students at that young age, and also the parents that come along on those field trips, I think is key. And in trying to change the culture around how local government engages with their community, and that we don't always just have to be ordinance and enforcing the way things are being managed. Yes, that happens to be there. We build those things into place, but being able to articulate the positive aspects of the forest and what it offers the community is really where I think you start to change that mindset and the shift and being able to get buy-in. We are looking at doing the urban food type garden, our community garden. The city staff is this next weekend on the 17th. We're going to be doing our first round of planting in a demonstration garden that's going to be open doors around the public. One of our long-term Park and Rec Commission members was active in the Rotary Club, and years ago they built a demonstration space for us, and a garden building for us to run instruction out of. And at some point, not necessarily this phase of planting, but at some point we hope to build a community orchard at the edge of this community garden in honor of Rick Nordham, who was on our both our urban forestry or our Parks and Rec Commission and our Rotary Club locally. So engaging in those local service organizations is huge in really building support for a program.
Yeah, I can already see the birth of a weekly urban forestry show. I don't see any other way, because this rabbit hole is so deep. Maybe we can close on ideas or examples of how you can get involved with your urban forestry, or pretty much everything we talked about. Any examples or ideas of, kind of like you've given already, but any others that come to mind on involving your community?
Well, I can go if Brian's okay with that.
Yeah.
Actually, what he touched on briefly kind of piqued my interest was the extension office. So, if you are nearby a land grant university, or you have a county extension office or any sort of an extension office, that's your awesome resource right there in the community. It's always free. And if you can pique their interest also, they're very eager to get involved, because trees are such a hot topic sometimes, and getting them to be the leaders at the forefront, the presenters, so that you don't have to be the bad guy when you do a council presentation and so on. They come from an outside source, a trusted source, to share the value of trees or whatever it might be. And so making use of the extension office in your community is a great resource, and sometimes gets forgotten. And I think it's great to tap into that for any type of purpose related to our field of parks and recreation. So
fantastic. Anything else, Brian, as far as getting volunteers or people that want to be more active in all the above?
Yeah, the community gardens, community gardeners, again, that's largely ran through the extension in most of the western states. The other resource that's out there, if you're wanting to try to establish a program like this, many states have got a community urban forestry forester basically at the state level that is active in trying to establish or help communities establish an urban forestry program. So reaching out to that individual, maybe reach out to one of the larger communities in your state who may have contacts with that resource and begin the networking process with that's urban and community forester, because they've got resources and can provide you with information on how to establish your first inventory, how to set up a successful urban forestry ordinance and that sort of thing, and start to lay the groundwork for how you do this within a community.
Right.
I'm standing on the shoulders of somebody that had the opportunity to do that early on, and that's how we're able to have the successful active crew that is out managing and setting our community up for success for the next hopefully 100 years.
Fantastic. Okay, so we'll go ahead and close that segment out at the 1 hour mark, and I'd like to take the rest of the community with us to do a little backstage cooking. If y'all got a few extra minutes. All right, so the Daily Parks and Rec Show is now like we envisioned it, becoming a media company for Parks and Recreation. And much like the Young Professionals Network was an obvious, hey, we should have a weekly show for them coming in. And same thing with facilities maintenance. That was such a huge topic. That show runs 4 days a week. What do you think would be a good day or time around the urban forestry topic? We could do like a series, maybe once a quarter or something, or even a monthly or weekly show. Any thoughts around how we can kind of serve this topic well?
I always think about, because we already have certain tree related or nature related months. So Earth Month is April typically, So I was thinking you could ramp it up in March to talk through the April piece. So maybe the March and April timeframe is what I was thinking. But I mean, it'll be good to spread it out, obviously, Craig. But maybe ramp it up in March and April. I think would be a good time, because that's when it's front and center in the news, and local agencies. We're all planting trees, irrespective of which part of the country. Even in the colder climates up north, Earth Month is still a big deal, and they do a lot of the tree-related, plant-related activities. So.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I after digging into facilities maintenance and seeing how many arborists are on staff at park departments and how many crews that, people like Bryan run, and it's like a significant part of the capital outlay to maintain this. Yeah. I know on the media side, I would have no problem booking 52 shows a year for someone that would speak on urban forestry till the end of time. Yeah. It really is a very deep topic, and whether it be maintenance or planting fruit trees or, all the technical side of it, certainly do a monthly show. That would be 12 shows, 52 shows would be once a week. But I love this topic. Maybe it's just me because I live in like a forest practically in the South. But yeah, let me know if y'all have any thoughts on that. And then I easily have another 10 shows that right now they're just going to sit on the facilities maintenance show. But, we could certainly peel it off and give it its own weekly or monthly show.
One idea just came to mind. Sorry, Bryan, just before I forget this thought real quick. Maybe actually doing it live, like Craig, maybe finding a local arborist or a tree company or the Parks and Rec Department, Forestry Division, when they're out there doing a tree trimming or a tree cutting, maybe actually doing a live show with the camera on them, so to speak, might be a way to show the, sometimes the simplicity, but at the same time that it is highly qualified professional job that you have to qualify for. And so you can touch on both things, and maybe that might be one way to do it, actually be live on screen, so to speak.
Yeah, definitely. Anything from your end, Bryan?
I think there's certainly ample information out there. There's a lot of high quality educators in the tree related field.
Yes.
I don't think it'll take a lot to fill up for sure 52 episodes.
Yeah. That's kind of what I was thinking. I mean, there are people that have dedicated their life to understanding trees, and this is what they do for a living. 52 would we would have to slice the Maine population down almost nothing just to limit it to that.
Yeah, I don't know if it just becomes, something as a part of your maintenance episodes for now.
Yeah.
Until it stands and spins out on its own. But I certainly think there's enough information. And I think the other piece of it is urban forestry and arboricultural care is one of those foundational pieces to the success of our operations and parks. And if we don't get that one right, we set ourselves up for some major failures. So I think it's a needed topic. And then I think it also integrates with the community planning side and allows us to have a platform to have successful conversations with community and urban development type discussions that allow for park spaces to be effective and stormwater infrastructure to be added in communities. And I just think it's one of those really great discussion points that allows us to build support for the work we do that helps build community and tie people to the place, just like your story with the going out and measuring trees. Those are the things that tie us to the place that we live.
Yeah.
And that's really what it's all about. That's the big why of why we do this every day.
And I think this is one of those topics where, there are cities and people that are doing this in such a masterful way, and the cost of doing this wrong is devastating. And so, if you're planting trees, you are going to spend some money, and you are committing a huge amount of resources, public resources. And so to not have a place where we can deposit all this wisdom, which is really at our fingertips. It's really just a matter of us saying, at least the Daily Parks and Rec show or our media company would just give a stage and just turn the mic on and then hand it to those masters that are currently doing their job. That way we can kind of share that wisdom and not keep it siloed to these communities that are doing it well. So I think we've got a good opportunity here.
I was going to say you could potentially add to that list of guests on your show, like community advocates, and champions, because as Bryan was alluding to, the person that got the department started in his community, people like that. There are many out there, that would be, I think, sometimes a better way, more impactful way to showcase the value of trees and the green canopy, So I think that could be another way to do that.
Well, I'll start as always, I'll start a group chat on LinkedIn, and we'll title it Urban Forestry. If there's anyone, like you said, advocates or just arborists that are just, examples we want to shine a light on and hold up, that would be a good guest for the show. Just add them to that, and we'll just start there. This will be show number 1, and we'll see where it goes. But appreciate you guys' time today and for coming on. What a great show. I have a whole list of questions I never even got to. So maybe we can do a version 2 of this down the road when y'all have time. But appreciate y'all coming on the show today. Thank y'all so much for sharing all that wisdom with us. All right.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Okay. So, God, what a great show that was. There's so many things that are just ideas and things we can do. But I think initial takeaway is just what an important topic trees are in our urban environment. And of course, this being a show, our media company dedicated to parks and recreation, the green spaces are maintained by our parks department. And so every park, I don't know if I've ever seen a park, at least down south, where there is not a tree of some sort. Oh, look, and I got a comment from let's see, Eric Adams. He said, Craig, this topic feeds directly into what I've mentioned to you about the importance of parks being looked at as essential infrastructure. Really important. Great comment there, Eric. So I think right now we can just plop urban forestry inside of our Monday through Thursday, 9:30 a.m. Facilities maintenance show. But similar to YPN and Youth Sports Mastery, I see this easily becoming a topic of its own. I may need help with a show host. So if you're would like to, maybe volunteer as a maybe a host every quarter, we could have a couple of hosts that would just come and help me manage the stage and the topic, because this is not a topic that I would even remotely consider myself a master on. Maybe just an advocate and a fan, but I by no means am at the level of some of these men that I've met, Bryan being one of them, Seve as well, as far as, and I'm sure both of them would consider themselves limited in information compared to the people that they know. So if you perhaps are one of these people, maybe some type of national or state recognized master or professional when it comes to urban forestry, please reach out to me on LinkedIn, Craig LeBlanc. And I'd love to get you plugged in. I'm going to go ahead and create today a LinkedIn group called Urban Forestry in the Daily Parks and Rec Show. And then we are launching Youth Sports Mastery. So all things youth sports. Shout out to Aaron Lux. He is my co-host there and does a lot of great work in youth sports. Also, we have Young Professionals Network as well. And this is for all young professionals, college interns that are looking to pursue a career in parks and recreation, but also the teachers and mentors and professors that are teaching the young people that are kind of moving towards parks and recreation as their career path are welcome on that Friday show. So that's a weekly show every Friday, 12 noon. Sorry, I did not get to make our facilities maintenance show this morning. I did not have a guest, and I had a phone call that was doing really well. And so I wanted to keep that going. And of course, it was all about parks and recreation. It had something to do with our youth sports mastery. So if you are interested in learning more or helping us to create a weekly show or a monthly show around urban forestry, please reach out to me. We'll add you to that group, and we're just going to go ahead and launch it. And if there's enough demand for it, it'll just keep going. If not, maybe we'll just revisit this topic every now and then, at least quarterly or yearly, as part of our facilities maintenance show. But I really think this show could have its own weekly or monthly show, because it's such a big topic. And as I said, I probably have 20 questions I never even got to ask. I wanted Bryan to speak on a lot of the fire prevention and a lot of that kind of stuff, because he's kind of an expert in that one. And then I know he's got a lot of experts that him and Seve could point us to for really good content. But all right, so we'll go ahead and close it there. This is Craig LeBlanc with the Daily Parks and Rec Show. This is called the Leaders in Parks and Rec. And so if you are a director, superintendent, or a master in some of the topics that affect parks and recreation, please reach out to me, or Sherry is actually our recruiter on LinkedIn that's constantly plugging people in. And she's recently been telling me, Craig, it used to be me reaching out to people saying, hey, here's who we are. Here's what we're doing. We're trying to build a media platform for Parks and Rec, similar to how, ESPN is for sports, MTV is for music. We want to build a media platform where all the Parks and Rec content creators can call home, and we can help them with distribution and even help edit their content and just get their message out there more. So if you are a content creator inside of the Parks and Rec community, please reach out to me at zero cost. We want to help you get your message out, and you can just kind of sit in the family of content producers under DPR's media company, which stands for Daily Parks and Rec Show Media Company. So we'd love to help you that. This month, we are launching 3 brands. Yes, last Thursday was the successful launch of our first Youth Sports Mastery. We are coming up, I think, on our 6th Young Professionals Network show this coming Friday. So that's an every Friday show, and still pushing the development of facilities maintenance show. So I've got a lot of guys that are coming up and helping me to build out the facilities maintenance show. This was actually the most requested, shocker, this was the most requested topic. So I think I'm sitting on 360 phone interviews with mostly park and rec directors, but a lot of assistant directors and superintendents as well. And I would ask them the question, is there any topic that is just underserved that you'd like to see us create content as we build out this media company? What are the different show slots weekly, monthly, whatever. And facilities maintenance was like top of the list, almost on every time. Of course, YPN was on there as well. Financial Fridays is another show that we're developing in the back that we should launch. I think that's going to end up on Fridays as well. That has a lot to do with your deferred maintenance costs, just making sure that financially we're sustainable park systems. So that's another great topic as well. But anyway, if you'd like to see us develop a show for urban forestry, reach out to me. We're gonna need the help of the community to do this as far as content. By no stretch is anybody on the Daily Parks and Rec show consider themselves a master when it comes to urban forestry. So we can turn on the mics, run the stage, edit the films, distribute everything, but we can't create the content, and we're going to depend on y'all. I'd be happy to run the stage for y'all and ask questions, but it really, your story is on display. We're just here to kind of roll the camera. Okay, so that's all I got today. We got an exciting week. It is a booked week on almost every single show, continuing to book. And actually, I forgot to tell y'all the story, finish the story of what Sherry was telling me, is that now it's inbound. Like, people are really wanting to be a part of this show. There's a ton of momentum that we are feeling in the creation of this media company. And I just want to thank everybody for all the overwhelming support and love that we're getting to continue to do what we're doing. And we're having a great time doing it. So appreciate all the love and support. Thank you all so much. Again, this is Craig LeBlanc, the doorman with the Daily Parks and Rec Show Leadership Edition. I will see y'all at 9:30 tomorrow for the Facilities Maintenance Show, followed by another Leaders in Parks and Rec. Y'all have an awesome week. Love you guys. Bye. The future of parks and recreation is here, and it starts with you. Welcome back to the Daily Parks and Recreation Show, where we bring you the latest insights, trends, and conversations shaping the world of parks and recreation. Today, we're diving into something that's shaping the future of our industry: Young Professional Networks, or YPN. If you love your job and love the parks and recreation community and are looking to connect with the next generation of leaders, this episode is for you. YPN is where driven, passionate professionals come together to connect, grow, and make a real impact. It's not just about networking, it's about building the future of our communities. Why join YPN? Career growth and mentorship. Learn from the best in the industry. Innovative ideas and collaboration. Be part of the next big movement. Leadership development. Take charge, make decisions, and create change. Whether you're just starting out or looking to take your career to the next level, YPN is your gateway to success. From exclusive networking opportunities to cutting-edge industry insights, this is where you build your legacy. Because the future of parks and recreation starts with you.